Welcome to The Problem, a Lockwood and Co podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
And today we're talking about all of part 6, the last 4 chapters of the book. Is this going to take us 2 hours? Maybe.
Nah, not much happens here.
So part 6 is called A Face in the Dark. And we're starting with chapter 23, in which Lucy wakes up alone in the rubble of the King's prison and finds the source of the Chelsea outbreak. And the chapter art is the ghosts that kind of crowd in on her down here, the ghosts of the prisoners.
This is really good. The eyes being the most well-defined thing is very, very creepy.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. Yeah,
it's cool.
I've got to post it over it. It's just the actual thing that I wrote down, because I always just slap a post-it over the chapter art and write down my first thoughts, is a bunch of ghosts is what I wrote down.
Yep. At first, she doesn't see anything at all because she just talks for a few paragraphs about how it's completely dark down there, which is terrifying to me.
She says it's so pitch black, you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed. And that is my nightmare. As someone who could potentially lose the use of her eyes in the future, that is genuinely one of my biggest fears.
Have you ever been in a place so dark you couldn't tell?
I don't think so. Like, I've been camping in the middle of nowhere, but that's actually quite bright at night because the stars and the moon, you can see them so much better out there.
Isn't that weird? Even on like a moonless night, you're like, wow, I can really see a lot with the starlight.
Yeah, like I've definitely walked to the outhouse in the middle of the night without a flashlight.
Mm-hmm.
Although once you get there, you need, because the bug, the spider, anyways, let's not talk about it.
It's different problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been underground before where, they like turn the lights off and it's like, I hate this.
I've been, because I went to school for theater, for like backstage theater stuff. That's what I did in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I have definitely at one point been trying to get back behind where we kept the music stands when somebody yells lights out, because they were designing lights on stage, and I was like in amongst the music stands and just had to freeze and it went pitch black. And then eventually, because they turned on the lights, and I was like, oh, thank God. that did happen to me one time. Yes,
that's pretty good. Yeah. Imagine that, but it's skeletons, and that's what Lucy is doing.
Yeah. No, thank you.
It's clear to me that she has a concussion or something. She's badly injured. She's dizzy, and it's mostly about her trying to get up, get her balance, and figure out where she is.
So they don't really... I'm going to forget to talk about this later, so I'm going to bring it up now. They talk later that Bobby Vernon goes to the hospital with a sprained ankle and a concussion. 100% Lucy has a concussion here and should go to the hospital. But she does not. And that drives me bonkers. You have a concussion, you go to the hospital. Done and done.
This is the nightmare dystopian version of London, so probably Fitz has health insurance and Lockwood and Co doesn't. So it's like
nobody
America.
But an American would even think that in a dystopian society like this one, that you can't just go and get health care.
Yeah.
Like, it just wouldn't even occur to anybody else that has happened. I will say, the way that she describes how she landed with like one arm underneath her and one flung out and that sort of thing, I was like, man, that sounds like how I like to sleep. Because I've definitely woken up in the middle of the night with an arm under me that is so asleep I'm not sure I can move it.
You're like, do I have an arm anymore? Yeah. But eventually she does like get up. She has, she even has a head injury. Like, she talks about her hair is matted and sticky with blood.
Mm-hmm.
She realizes that all of her supplies are gone, basically. Her rapier's gone, her backpack's gone, the skull is gone.
And she does have her Batman belt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And does find some matches and some stubs of candles.
I like this situation though, because it's kind of like what the whole book has been. Her going alone with the ghost, like throwing all of her supplies away voluntarily. And it was like she was training for this moment almost. Like, she didn't know that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that. I didn't even think about that. So then when she sort of gets up, she says at one point, she gives a sob of self-pity.
Mm.
Although, I kind of disagree with the self-pity bit because, like, I think, well, maybe it is self-pity, but, like, I think she's kind of allowed it here in the moment. But also, she's not sure if Lockwood is alive.
Yeah.
So, there's more going on there than self-pity. But then at once, she swallows it back down because she notices that she's surrounded by ghosts and that emotional displays are going to be bad. So then she says, no more displays of emotion. And I couldn't... so I wrote down, Lucy and Lockwood's life motto. And then I was also like, England in general, life motto.
Right. Yeah. These books are about good English virtues.
Yeah.
Like not feeling, not communicating.
Just getting the job done and not complaining about it.
That's right. Just carry on. There is a moment where she's like thinking about like the matches that you mentioned and that you should always have matches. She says that it's really important rule, maybe up there with the biscuit rule. Mm-hmm. And a crazy thing is that in the North American version of the book, it says biscuit rule.
Hasn't it always said biscuit rule?
No, because in the first book, it was like the cookie rule. And we were like, the fuck is this?
Oh, I guess
so they like changed it. I feel like that would be so confusing if you changed it for a kid to be like, it's the cookie rule. And then later you're like, it's the biscuit rule. And you'd be like, what are they talking about?
Interesting. I mean, obviously I like this better because the cookie rule sounds stupid.
They've finally changed it back. I don't know. I don't know if they have different editors or what.
Like it's wild to me that they did this because this was published after Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we have seen that Americans can understand. Although sometimes I do think about how they filmed the two different versions of the first movie. And I'm like, God damn, the catering to Americans is so wild in that.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's funny, though.
Yeah, so like those kids who've never acted before in their lives had to nail scenes twice with two different words in them and make them exactly the same. Like, what a waste of time and money that is. And
that's really funny.
Anyways, boggles the mind.
But she does have plenty of matches thanks to Holly packing the bags and everything. And when she thinks about her, she thinks just Holly. And this is like the first time this happens in the whole book, where it's not Miss Monroe, it's not Holly Monroe, it's just Holly.
Right, yeah. I do like everything that we get about Lucy and Holly in these chapters, but I will say my most hated thing about Holly does happen in these chapters also. The thing that I think makes her an actual villain, so much so that I thought it happened much earlier in the book. And when we didn't come across it, I was like, oh God, did I make it up? Have I been hating her all this time for no reason? But no, it's in these chapters. Yeah, I want to slap her in the face when she... Anyways, we'll get there.
Yeah. But yes, she lights the match and lights a candle and boom, hey, there's ghosts everywhere, like you said.
So yes, there's lots of ghosts and they start kind of whispering her name. And Lucy, I love this because she starts talking to them like they're normal people, like they will understand and listen to her. She's just like she literally says, keep your hair on, which is funny.
Yeah.
And I guess
pretty good.
Through her wanting to avoid them, like, 'cause she doesn't want to get ghost touched, they kind of lead her down a hallway. And she leaves one of her candles behind, which I love how he had this happen, how he had her pull out two candles and then leave one behind. Because A, she does have a concussion, as we discussed, and that is like just a stupid thing you would do. But like he could have just had her only have one candle.
Yeah. Well,
but he like specifically is like she has to leave one behind.
Yeah, for Lockwood to find it.
Oh, that's true, I guess. But like that's like there
it's
was
weird
only
though.
Two hallway choices. I feel like he would have found her eventually.
Or he gets down there and he's like, well, there's no candle. She must be dead. George, just pull me back up. Never mind, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I give up so easily.
She does, at one point here, try to rest because she just doesn't feel good because of all the injuries. And she puts her head against the stone, and it's that at that point when her body touches the walls of the prison that like the psychic presence of the place pours into her. This creates the connection that she has with them that allows her to kind of walk through them and for them to guide her and stuff. They're not just attacking her.
Yeah, I'm going to say this probably a lot, or at least I'm going to be thinking it almost the whole time, but I'm so sad we don't get this in a TV show format.
Yeah, this is really spooky and cool.
It's spooky and cool, but also it's almost like Lucy at the top of her power here, like she has this army of ghosts that are listening to her. I feel like she could take over, she could. I like the idea that maybe she could command these ghosts and take people out.
It also kind of shows how she's been right the whole time and Lockwood's been wrong. That like she could have been doing this. Right now she doesn't have a choice. So that like kind of makes it more possible. And these ghosts are also, they're not like the one in Mrs. Wintergarden's house that's like a psychopath to begin with. Mm-hmm. They're like victims and...
I mean, they were in prison, so obviously they're evil criminals. That's the only reason people get put in prisons.
I think it specifically says that a lot of them were mentally ill and they were lepers and all this stuff. And the king was like, well, all these undesirables in one place. Like,
let's
we'll tell the people...
down.
Yeah. Oh, we moved them. Don't worry. But really what they did was collapse the place on top of them. So
yeah. Obviously I was joking. I had forgotten that there was mentally ill people in there when I made my joke. And if I'd remembered that, I would not have.
Even
even so, obviously I don't mean it's the opposite of what I said. You know what I'm saying?
She goes into a space that's like a whole bunch of like skeletons and they're all just like pushed to the walls and there's like a clear space in the middle.
Right. And there's a burn.
This is weird.
Yeah, there's a burn in the middle. And eventually she's looking around and she finds a cigarette butt. Mm-hmm. So it's very obvious that someone has been in here recently, moving things about.
The bones are like so thick too that she's like, they almost come up to her knees and stuff. There's like just tons of people here.
That's disgusting. Like disgusting from the bone perspective, but also like that this happened to these people.
Yeah.
But then eventually she looks up and notices that all the ghosts have gotten closer to her and they're kind of crowding in. She does also say that someone was very keen on housekeeping down here. You'd think Holly Monroe had been at work. And I like that she reverts back to the last name there.
Just to insult her a little bit. What it's setting up here is like the way that the bone glass was arranged, right? Where all the bones are on the outside, framing the mirror part.
Oh, there is no mirror here at the moment.
Right.
There's the burn mark.
She doesn't put that together, just the burn mark.
And I think there's, or maybe George brings that up later. Never mind.
Yeah. But I think what's kind of interesting about that, especially like when you remember the previous book, they left out all the stuff about the bone glass from the newspaper. So like nobody knows about that.
Nobody knows about that.
And unless they're like an insider. So it kind of tells you something about like who this must be. They have to be somebody. It's not just some random person who read the papers and they were like, I want to try that. And
presumably they must have a copy of either Biggerstaff's papers or Mary Dulac's book.
Right.
Because there was 6 copies of her book printed. I find it was more than just the 2 that we know about, wasn't it?
Yeah, or there's like internal reports about the case that insiders would have that outsiders wouldn't, and all of this kind of stuff.
I don't know. My only thing about that is that I don't picture, because it was Deepak and Fitz who would know about the bone glass from book 2, and I just don't see them sharing information with Rotwell.
Yeah, I would think that Rotwell has a lot of access, you know, the way that Kipps was saying that the agencies run DPRAC and not the other way around. So, you know, Tom Rotwell is like, I want to, or whatever his name is. I can't remember
Steve?
which Rotwell he is.
I think Tom was
Steve
the
Rotwell.
original.
Tom's the original, yeah.
Whatever.
Is Steve Rotwell's like, I want to see this file. I feel like someone would give it to him.
as Lucy is noticing all of this and the ghosts are getting closer and she's like trying to tell them, I'll get you a proper burial. Don't worry. I will make sure good things happen to you. Just please don't kill me.
Yeah.
And that is when she sort of says out loud that she's not sure about Lockwood, or like she mentions Lockwood out loud. And then she's like, well, I don't know if he's alive. And she kind of has this moment where she stops like being with the ghosts and is like, what am I doing? What is happening? I don't know. I'm not thinking properly.
It says, my fear lapped out against the edges of the room in great almighty swells. All at once I could hear the figures whispering together again. So like her emotions trigger the ghosts into some other state. It's really hard for me to read anything in a way that's like, this is a symbol. But like this is like, it's so symbolic to me that like she's like fallen, like the whole thing with Holly blew up and now she's like in the real core of the problem.
Yeah.
And like her feelings about Lockwood, and that's like triggering these ghosts and all of this stuff. So like we're deep in the heart of what's really been happening with Lucy for the whole book here.
Honestly, I feel like these pages are the closest we ever come to Lucy flat out saying how much she likes Lockwood.
Yeah.
Like even in book 4 and 5, I don't like, especially in book 5, because everything just feels sort of settled between them when we get there. So nothing is ever really said, which is them.
It feels so much more mature and like almost like an adult relationship. And this is really raw here. Yeah.
Yeah. When she's thinking to herself that maybe he died, she's like, he would have come for me ages ago otherwise. And like, she doesn't question that thought. She's just like, no, he would have come for me. But also she has no real idea how much time has passed or where she is. So she doesn't know how difficult it is to get to her.
And at the same time, this candle is finally burning down and she's like, oh crap, I'm out of candles. And the ghosts keep crowding in more and more and more. And she's like, I gotta light more stuff. No, get back. And then the ghosts do like stop because something else is coming.
And that's when her candle goes out.
Yeah.
Yay.
And that's the end of the chapter, of course. Another strong, ending to the chapter. You're like, what? No, I must turn the page. And in chapter 24, Lockwood vanquishes the fetch and helps Lucy escape down a secret tunnel.
And the chapter art is indeed the Lockwood fetch.
The hollow boy.
Hey, come on, don't jump the gun. We're not there yet. Anyways, so Lucy does have a flare, and she kind of thinks about maybe just chucking it randomly because she's like, ow.
Go out with a bang.
Yeah, and this is when she realizes that the crawling, creepy thing is coming towards her again. So it comes towards her a bit, and she gets just as scared as she was before, and then something kind of happens, and she passes out, basically. Everything just goes black, and she closes her eyes. And we don't know how long she's out for. But then a voice wakes her up.
Yeah. So it says, and as it swelled and altered, I felt a corresponding opposite sensation. It was like the inward suction of a bellows or a hatch opening beneath me. I felt my strength drain out. It poured away. My head spun. Everything went black. I closed my eyes. And we heard in the previous part, Bobby Vernon talk about like, I ran to the elevator and my friend was there and the elevator was there. And then he like falls down the shaft. So it seems like he was pulled into some illusion of the fetch. And I feel like that's what's happening here, that she's like
being pulled
psychically
into the illusion.
Pulled in. Yeah.
Yeah. I fear, I don't know. For me, it just felt very much like she had to close her eyes and be out of it for a minute in order to believe that it was Lockwood.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So, like, whether that's just a writing choice that Shroud needed to make, or whether that's how the ghost operates.
I think you're right. That it definitely...
Yours sounds better, like, from a writing perspective, that of her being drawn into the illusion. But
I think that's what's happening. But
yeah.
I think you're totally right. For the effect that we need to have here for the first time reader of her talking to Lockwood, like this, for this to be the emotional punch that it is. You need to not like watch Lockwood's face come out of this thing. You need to like think that it could be Lockwood's ghost.
Yeah. She hears Lockwood's voice basically wake her up. And at first she says, and all at once my legs buckled with joy because I knew it. I knew the voice. It was the one I wanted to hear more than any other. Which is so sad.
It was George. Oh, no, wait. It was Lockwood. Yeah.
And at first she does think she's just talking to Lockwood. And then he's just being kind of weird. And then she starts kind of questioning it. And eventually he says, nothing could keep me from you. Nothing in life or death. And that's like exactly what she wants.
Yeah.
In the exact wrong way that she wants it.
Mm-hmm. So I love this so much.
Yeah.
What I really like about what happens here, maybe I'm totally wrong about this though, is I feel like Lucy ends up making all the right choices here, like emotionally here at the end of the book, but for like the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. And I feel like she kind of internalizes Lockwood's what Lockwood has been doing for this whole book. So what I mean here is like this moment where she thinks like, wait a minute, is Lockwood dead? This is my fault.
Right.
If I love people, it hurts them. And that's like what Lockwood believes.
Yeah.
And that's like the wrong lesson to take for Lucy from everything that happened. But it is like, it leads to the right action, if that makes sense. But I feel like that's exactly like being a teenager. Like this is such a teenager growing up way to internalize this whole thing.
And I don't think it's talked about a lot, but teenagers are incredibly self-centered. Not in like a greedy way, but just in a how difficult it is. Like how teenagers have so much going on mentally and emotionally and stuff that it's really difficult to not make themselves the center of every problem.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like I'm not being disparaging to teenagers when I say that. I just mean like they've got so much shit going on that it's really difficult to not think everything is their fault, whether good or bad.
Yeah, for sure. And I've said that before, that's a way to like wrest control of an uncontrollable situation. Like something terrible happens to you that's not your fault and you're like, well, I caused this, because then that helps you like make sense of it. That Lucy gets a notion of like, oh, I'm responsible for Lockwood. My love is bad for him because he could hurt himself trying to protect me.
Yeah, she even thinks back about all the things that he's done in this book to protect her.
Yep.
And how that put him in danger, from the bathroom ghost near the beginning to the leap over the stairs at Miss Wintergarden's.
Mm-hmm. If you think back to the show too, there's like that moment where Skull looks through the bone glass and somehow Lucy is getting it too. And there's like the flashes of all those people, and then it shows Lockwood like dead or ghost touched or whatever. And I feel like that moment was set up to be a mirror for this moment where she would get like a bunch of flashes of like all the times Lockwood almost died to save me, and now I've killed him.
Yeah.
Now the thing has happened that I saw in the first season, you know.
And we're only halfway through the second season.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so then they basically have a conversation about like her saying, how did you die? And him just saying, I fell down the hole, and not having any real details about that.
I think the other thing that's really good about that and convincing is the reports that we got from the other people, from Flowbones and from Bobby Vernon, that they both saw people who were dead.
Yes.
And were like, come to me. And so that's how we would assume the fetch works. And so we're like, oh no, like this must be true that Lockwood is dead.
Even if you did think it was the fetch and not Lockwood's ghost, you might still think that Lockwood was dead because...
Yes. Yeah.
But I do think Lucy right now thinks this is genuinely Lockwood's ghost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But eventually she does sort of say that she wants to see him, and he's like, no, it would distress you. But then she convinces the ghost, or something happens. And when she sees more details of him, she sees like how the back is like just a inverted, like a concave version of what she's seeing at the front.
Yeah, like it's a mask or something.
Yeah, which is so weird. And that she says it was an empty thing, and I wrote down, or you could say hollow.
A hollow boy,
yeah,
if you will.
And that it has thick black fibers dangling at the margins, just like the creepy crawly.
Yeah.
And it's really good. I love that she comes to the conclusion that it is not Lockwood before Lockwood sticks his sword through it. Because I feel like if she still thought it was Lockwood while Lockwood killed Lockwood, it would have been a little bit more traumatic for her.
Oh, yeah. And it would have been like, is that the fetch killing Lockwood, or Lockwood's?
It would have been a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a really slow, like, unfolding realization that I feel like takes the reader, the first-time reader, along that journey really nicely. But yeah, it's such a creepy idea that, like, Lockwood is this mask and stuff, and I read that symbolically as, like, this is the whole thing that I've talked about, that Lucy has this fantasy of Lockwood, and this is her real problem, is, like, it's a constructed, not real version of him, and this is the thing that is like holding back everything between them for her. The thing that she needs to get over is this thing. And
then Lockwood comes through and stabs it, and then they have a real conversation finally.
Yeah.
So that's really good.
I can see the quote unquote shot in my head of like it kind of getting ripped, you know, with the rapier and unfolding, and he's in exactly the same place that it is. You know what I mean?
He just takes its place. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like,
although
it's so crazy.
I do really want to see, or I would have really liked to have seen how they did the inverted side of the ghost, because it's so weird looking in my imagination, and I really would have liked to see how they, or what they could manage for that. And because I don't know how, I know nothing about CGI, but I don't know. It would be really interesting what they imagined for it.
It'd be like, this is a really difficult stunt, Cameron, but we're going to need to hollow out your head and then put a camera in there.
Gross. Anyways, so I guess Lockwood walking down the hallway, because he can't hear the ghost, he hears Lucy cry, "I know what you are. You're not him. You're a fetch, an imposter, feeding on my thoughts. No, I don't believe you." Like, that must be so strange and worrying to hear as you are coming down the hallway. And then also, eventually the ghost, the fetch, looks at her, a pale smile shone in the pale, pale face. It looked at me with kindness and with love, which is exactly how she's always wanted Lockwood to look at her. And then a sword cut straight through it.
Okay, so she confronts it and says, like, you're not him, you're not real, but this is the future. This is like what will happen.
Good point. I forgot about that.
This is such a dark pill to like feed to Lucy. I feel like it's really important for her decision, and I wonder where it comes from. Do you think that this is, again, her own fear and the fetch is just feeding it back to her, or is there any kind of like supernatural connection to time that it can access?
No, I think it's her own fear, because that's the whole thing about a fetch, is that it gets into your head and shows you what you want, and in this case what you don't want. You know, like if it can see one, it can see the other.
It makes me wonder about the show with that whole thing with Skull and her seeing Lockwood ghost touched, if that was like her fear, or if they were trying to be like, one day this will happen.
The problem with that scene, as much as I do like it, especially the bit with Lockwood, I can't take it seriously because they also showed bits of that guy in jail who was not a murderer.
I know.
You know, and that kind of ruins me taking any of that seriously.
It does seem like it was in Lucy's head for that reason.
Yeah, I guess.
She was just freaked out by that guy. I don't mean to keep bringing up the show. I'm trying to figure out like what their approach was, or if they had talked to Stroud and he was like, oh yeah, this is the future, but actually she avoided the future by making a choice that changed it, or like, you know what I mean? Or like, there's no way that we can know that.
We can't know, but I just feel like ghosts predicting the future is not ever a way that Stroud was going to take these books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I think he's much more interested in ghosts getting in your head and screwing with you.
Yeah.
Because like, if you were going to have that be a thing, why not have that be a thing? It never comes up again.
With, especially because we have a type 3 and stuff like that. I do like when he kills the fetch, that she's like, he's like, oh, hey, Lucy. And then she's like too busy screaming to answer.
Yeah, because she just saw Lockwood's face stabbed through with a sword. And actually, we don't know. Maybe there's the mental connection that they had was just severed. That might have caused problems.
Yeah.
Right? So she's just in a real bad place.
But
then
like he was stabbing her. Yeah, like maybe she felt it. It was just
or like she felt it like ripped from her head. We don't know how deep in there it was.
Right,
I don't know.
Exactly.
There's possibilities. But anyways, yeah, so she's screaming, and then we just sort of skip over however they deal with that, which is the most English thing, like no emotions, as we said. And now we're just skip to them sitting together on a block of stone in the corner of the chamber.
She says it's cozy.
Yeah. And then they just finally, they confirm with each other that they're okay and that George and Holly are okay. And then eventually, Lockwood is like, and I climbed down the hole to find you. And Lucy says, you shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have risked yourself. And Lockwood says, the line heard round the world here, where he says, come off it. I'd die for you. Mm-hmm. Which is like the worst thing to say to her right then. Because she thought he did die for her for a good couple minutes there. But I also don't know how I feel about this line. I don't know if Lockwood would have ever said that. Like, he did. It's in the book. It's canon. But it feels weird to me that he actually said that. Like, it feels like Stroud wanted to gut punch Lucy. It doesn't feel to me like a natural thing Lockwood would say there. Absolutely, he would be thinking it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I feel like... I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, everyone's on edge right there. A lot of... Like, he also thought Lucy was dead or was afraid she was.
Yeah. And it's just the two of them.
Yeah.
And it's like they're very close right now. And he cares about her so much. I think it like gets past some of his defenses. I could see it. It's interesting to me to think about, like you were talk about Lockwood's death wish so much and how like this is not quite the admission of love that it might seem to be when a somewhat suicidal person is like, I'd kill myself for you. It would be like, okay, but you would do that anyway. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Would you die for George? I think so. Like would he die for any of them?
Yeah.
So it's not quite as romantic as it's always quoted to be, which I kind of like that though. Like he's a messed up guy. That's like the reality, like he vanquished the fantasy version of Lockwood. And this is the more messed up, real, damaged version, So I like that he says this romantic thing, but it's actually very troubled and problematic and messed up because like that's real.
It is what leads into them finally having a conversation about what's been going on emotionally between the two of them. Because he directly says, heaven knows I've come near it often enough. And then he puts his coat on Lucy, which I think is way more romantic than saying I would die for you.
Right.
Because especially since his sleeves are probably pushed up underneath.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. He probably, after he took the coat off, he rolled up his sleeves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So then he starts, like, does he stand up and start looking around or do they just keep talking? Sometimes I really always picture this scene as Lucy's sitting there huddled in his coat staring at a candle with Lockwood like looking around behind her, because there's like a really good fan art of that scene by the lady who's been taken on to do the graphic novels.
Oh yeah,
by
yeah.
her. Who?
She's great.
Yeah, she's so
I
good.
can't think of her name.
I can't think of her name either. And it's just so exactly how I picture this scene. So whenever he's like not getting up to look around, I'm like, when does that happen? That has to happen. I'm not sure it ever happens.
You can imagine it as walking and talking, I guess. There's nothing to say that that's not happening.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just how I picture this whole scene. Lucy admits that she doesn't really remember how she gets down there because she knows she banged her head. And this is where she actually says that she calls the fetch the Hollow Boy, which I wonder which came first, the title, or did he pull it from this sentence here?
I feel like it came out of the book. It feels that way to me.
Yeah, it feels that way to me too.
She's also curious, did you see what the fetch looked like? And he's yeah, it looked like a weird monster covered in spiders. And she's like, so you didn't see what I saw? He's like, I don't know. Was it a weird monster covered in spiders? Because that's what I saw. So like, she doesn't explain to him what she saw. She doesn't tell him what's going on. It's a big secret.
Oh, and just before that, Lockwood does describe what happened from his point of view when Lucy fell down the hole and how the poltergeist blew itself out after that. So it's not going crazy upstairs anymore. But that when he was blown away, he did have a long way to fall, but he kind of landed on the escalators, which I don't know if he's saying there was like a platform higher up that he landed on, because in my head he landed on the escalator in a head facing down kind of way. And it's really funny. It's terrible. You would be so hurt, but it looks hilarious.
I think what this means is that there's two escalators going in opposite directions, and between them is a wide enough space that you could like slide down it like a slide. And that's what he hit. That makes sense. That makes sense. But in my mind, he just like onto like the stairs of the escalator, but face down, so his feet are pointing up. It's really funny. Anyway, that's how I've always pictured that. It would hurt so much because escalators are like sharp. Yeah, they're made of metal.
I really don't want that to have happened, but that's where my mind always brings that. But then yes, she confirms with him that he didn't see it. Then they sort of start examining where they are, and Lucy points out all the things that make it look like people have been there recently. And Lockwood makes this weird remark about wax that's there, where he says it's Chinese wax they've been using. I have no idea what Chinese wax is in comparison with not Chinese. Like, what?
Yeah, I don't know either.
What does that mean? I have no idea. Anyways, but it makes it expensive. That's the point. It's top quality stuff.
And like some kind of ritual happened.
Yeah. Top quality wax.
And they find a cigarette. He also, we skipped over this, but he salted and put iron down on all the bones. So the ghosts are stop.
Leaving them alone. And then they talk about how this has got to be the source of the Chelsea outbreak of it all. And they found it. And Lockwood has this really nice bit where he says, you found it, Luce. You did so well. Even though she literally fell into it and then followed some ghosts. But still, it's funny. And then Lucy admits to being at fault for the poltergeist going crazy because of her argument with Holly. And then Lockwood very nicely points out that she and Holly saved Bobby Vernon, and that, or like they still did good things, even though the poltergeist did go crazy. And he points out that Holly didn't say anything about Lucy. She was just worried about her.
She wasn't like, Lockwood, listen.
Yeah.
Lucy is a real problem. We got to fire her because she caused all these problems. No, she was like, oh my God, where's Lucy? Is she okay? Lockwood finally comes around because she's like, Lockwood, I have to apologize. I haven't been myself lately. And Lockwood's like, wait. Actually, I need to apologize because ever since the Winter Garden house, I haven't treated you very well. I know I might have seemed standoffish. Come on, Lockwood. It's just, he took a deep breath. I didn't trust myself to be with you. I was too anxious about what might happen. This is a lot better than saying I'd die for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
My note is this is almost good of him. He's just too scared to do it right.
But that's a common theme with Lockwood.
Yeah, and he's a teenage boy, so.
And then, like Lucy says, what might happen in exactly what sense? She's like, what do you mean? Probably, I can see where maybe she was hoping something would happen, like he'd be afraid of...
I would have to kiss you and never stop.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But I like that Stroud doesn't actually give us her thoughts here. He goes on to talk about how her talent is so extraordinary. Oh, and now they're walking. They're right. He's leading them to the exit that he found in the water. Which
is really important.
Is
there's a way. Yes, that there's a way out of here.
Oh, yes. Okay. I thought you meant for the conversation.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. When Lockwood was looking for Lucy, he found a way out. So, yeah, he talks about her talent and how extraordinary it is and how it's getting easier for her to talk to the ghosts and, it's unique, your talent, but it makes you so vulnerable and I have to look after you.
Like you were my sister.
Don't say that, please.
And then, yeah, she says something knotted tightly in my chest in the dark of my mind. I saw again the palely smiling face. And so this is like, again, it's her fear that she's internalized that her love is poisonous. And so she's like, no. Like, it's like, I would die for you. This is the fear.
Yeah, this is a really good, like, them communicating, but not 100% communicating conversation. You know, like, maybe from Lockwood's point of view, it feels like they're finally laying everything out.
Yep.
And now Lucy's become the mysterious one holding things in. I don't...
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly right.
Well, I mean, there is that, but also I do think there are, like, Lockwood's not being... They could have really had this out a little bit more, but whatever.
Oh, no, I think when he says, like, I was afraid of what could have happened, and she's like, what could have happened? And he's like, well, like in an operative situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, he's not being totally honest. But I think that he, in his mind, he's like, I'm really opening up. This is intimacy right now. And she's like, oh my God, this boy would kill himself. I can't trust him to protect himself because, he can't control himself.
Yeah. And then Lucy admits to going into Jessica's room and what she saw there, both like physically with her eyeballs and with her talent.
There's a lot of lightheartedness around this, like beginning and end of it, where he's like, were you stealing my cookies?
Yeah.
And all of this kind of stuff, which I like that Stroud lightens things up a little bit before her big confession. But that she's also like so guilt riddled and worried about this.
Yeah.
It's very important, I think, for the intimacy of their relationship to get this out.
I like how he says, I should be angry with you. I should be furious. But he's not. And I think a part of me thinks that Lockwood is really great to have this excuse to be off the hook for how he's treated Lucy the past couple weeks. It's like, well, we both did some shit things. Maybe it's just a wash, Because that's exactly how I would feel. It was like, I was treating you shitty, and if somebody was like, well, I was treating you shitty back, I'm like, great, we're good,
Yeah.
So then Lockwood talks a bit more about what happened that day with Jessica and gives his point of view and about how he was just a young normal kid who didn't want to help her out. And so of course he thinks that if he had been there, she would have lived.
Mm-hmm.
And he does say how he destroyed the ghost and all of that, and just really goes into all of it, and then makes another joke about the biscuits there at the end, which is great. Oh, and then I do love how he's like, and now perhaps you can hop through the gap first. It may or may not be algae this time, and I'd like it to be you who finds out. So he has a little bit of anger about the invasion of privacy there. And I do like that. Well, Lockwood then sort of talks about what he did afterwards and how he almost immediately started training to be an agent because he doesn't like ghosts anymore, or at all anyways. And then he's like, so now you know everything, basically. And she's like, well, but also, he's like, oh, my parents, oh, that's another story entirely. A very long time back. And then there's this great bit where Lucy's like, maybe you hardly remember them. And he's like, no, I remember them all right. They were my first ghosts. And then we don't get any more about that. It's just like, oh, the exit. Let's go.
Yeah, that's the end of the chapter.
It's just a wild thing to say.
I feel like that never... we never find out details about that.
No, we do.
I don't remember them then.
In book 5. I'm pretty... Well, maybe not details, but we do get the story of how he saw them.
I have, for people following along, I have read book 5 now. I only read it once, and I have a hard time reading things like one time, and then I'll be like, I didn't really understand this at all. And I have to read things like 2 or 3 times to get it. The first time that I read this book, I was very confused. And if you would have given me like a 7th grader quiz about it and be like, what are the major details? I would have like failed that test. I would have not understood, because there was like a whole thing about, I had seen on Twitter, people are like, there's a fetch in book 3 and this is what a fetch is. And when I read it, I was like, in Lavender Lodge, I was like, so this is the fetch coming up the street to get them. So like, I just totally misread the book, right? Like I did not understand what was happening. I had to read it a few times. So yeah, a lot of times things like this will be like, and we never find out about this again. And then it's explicitly explained in a scene that I just don't remember.
In the same way that the end of book 2 makes you think there's genuinely a ghost in Jessica's room. It's not as big of a, it's not like he was standing next to them and saw some and like that's not what it is. It is kind of a blink and you'll miss it in book 5.
Okay.
But it does come up. Anyways, here we are, chapter 5. Deepak arrive, secure the source.
Chapter 5?
Yep, 25. Chapter 25. That's what I said. Shut up. Fuck. Deepak arrive, secure the source, and confirm that the Chelsea outbreak is over. Do they?
Yeah, by the end of the chapter.
Oh, okay. So the chapter art is Lucy's backpack, so presumably Skull is in there. Or it's like a backpack, and I'm assuming it's Lucy's.
Yeah, I think so. Is there any difference in your mind between a rucksack and a backpack? Since they say rucksack in the...
Yes. For me, like, I don't think this is true anytime that I've read the word rucksack, but for me, a rucksack is one of those ones where the straps that you put over your shoulder are also the clothes at the top, like, and you pull them tight to close it.
Okay.
For me, that's what I think of as a rucksack.
Yeah, I think of it as a more heavy-duty affair, for sure.
Oh, so the exact opposite.
I don't know.
Of mine is more flimsy.
I know the kind of thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like something that I've regretted wearing to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Because they're like the least comfortable straps.
Yeah,
and
it just digs into you.
They don't fit that much bottled water, like, why did I make this stupid choice?
Yeah, I always think of rucksack as like, you're going to be doing serious hiking, like it's made of leather and things like that.
Oh, see, I think of that as a backpack.
Yeah. Like
the heavy duty ones are backpacks because, I don't know. I guess because you go backpacking.
Right, right. Yeah.
I love that they exit the tunnels and sort of come up behind the group, and George and Kipps are like getting up a rope so that they can
rappel down.
And I love this idea. Kipps and George are like talking to each other like really like engineers, like if we put it here it'll give us this friction, whatever, right?
Right.
And we have to do this right, and safety and blah 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 blah. And then they're just like, hey guys, we're here.
Lockwood would have some cool thing to say that like makes them turn around and they're like, oh my god, you're here.
Yeah, this would have been great in the TV show too.
Yeah. Before they get there, it does talk about like them coming out at the Thames, and it says the way the panel had been cast aside suggested that someone had made a hasty exit, and boot prints in the mire supported this.
Right.
So
yes.
like not only the cigarette down there, but like
actual
somebody,
boot prints.
Yeah, somebody was just here. And so.
Yeah, I don't know if they talk about it in a moment or if we missed it, but it is made clear that, like, Lucy missed seeing these people by maybe minutes.
Yeah.
Which would have been real bad.
Probably all the noise and her falling down and having the head injury, they got away while she was waking up.
Scared away, yeah. I do also want to say the first line in the chapter is, "So night bled into morning and Lockwood and Co. emerged blinking from the darkness." Which, now that I read it back, is I guess it could kind of... Because it sounds like it's just about the two of them, Lockwood and Co.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it could be about... Because the sun is rising for all of them. But
I definitely read it the way you're saying, though.
Yeah, that she's just referring to the two of them as Lockwood and Co., which I like. I don't know. It's an interesting little bit. Anyways, they reunite with the group. George and Kipps, again... They stop trying to rappel down because it's silly now, obviously. Even I like that she says Flo kind of gives her a nod, approximating good-natured contempt. You know, that's Flo being happy that she's not dead.
Right.
So Lucy goes to talk to Holly, and they kind of have a cordial conversation, and they're both, bashed about but good, is what Lucy says.
Mm-hmm.
And then Holly returns the backpack because she recovered it from when it was ripped off of Lucy's back, which means that she saved Skull, which is hilarious considering how much Skull wanted her to die.
She's like, I found your skull. There's an egg whisk in there. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah. But... Can you imagine? She just opens the backpack. It specifically says it doesn't look like she did. But imagine she opened the backpack and the skull is just staring at her and somehow there's an egg whisk next to him. Anyway, so Lockwood's arguing with Kipps about what they should do because Kipps still believes in the system. But eventually, George and Flo go and look at the room that Lockwood and Lucy found.
Right.
I
should have said this when we were talking about Holly. I do think their conversation, like, as boring and stilted as it is, which is like on purpose, clearly. But Lucy like makes the right observation here, I think, where she says there was no subtext to it, no hidden agenda. It was weary, wary, and cautiously forgiving. It was what it was, basically, and that was a start. Which is like, this is the most healthy relationship, I think, to come out of this book, is between the two of them at this point. I think
we haven't seen the evil yet.
The evil? Oh no, yeah, that's true. That's later. But at this point, it seems like the two of them are like actually being honest and real with each other, and like that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
But Barnes shows up.
Yeah, not long after George and Flo run off to go and take measurements and see where the source was, Barnes and Deeprek show up, and eventually a bunch of suits show up too, who look like they are in charge, who nobody recognizes.
I love that Barnes shows up and he's like, "What have you done? I buy my socks here."
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty good.
To be fair, good socks, they can be hard to find that fit you well.
It's like the most adult thing you've ever said. But yeah, he is dismayed by how much destruction has happened to the store. The door falls off when he leans on it, which is a great gag.
Great. And then eventually Lockwood turns on the charm and starts explaining what all happened and how it all blah, 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 and how basically they have found the source of the Chelsea outbreak.
Yep. He's like, "We solved all your problems. George Cubbins here will illustrate to you with his map how
he's not
we
there.
Figured this
he
out."
Says that George will show you when he gets back.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, because George has gone to they wisely sent George down the secret passage.
I love that one of the important looking people questions Lockwood, and then Lockwood is like, "Who actually are you? You're not the cleaning staff, I hope."
Yeah, that's really good.
So good.
And then later, Aikmir himself shows up.
Yep.
ready for business, very indignant.
This would have been a great scene in the TV show, man.
Oh, man.
This guy. So good. He shows up in like a chauffeured car. So an asshole.
That's so
and then
good.
he's a little disturbed because obviously his tree is destroyed, and also, you know, there's a hole to an old prison beneath in his store.
There's a sinkhole in the middle of the store.
Yeah.
I love that when that happens, the Barnes and his handlers, whoever these people are, close ranks, and they're like, no, civilian, you obey us.
Yeah.
That feels very real.
That they were willing to throw Lockwood under the bus until an outsider wanted Lockwood thrown under the bus. Anyways, Lucy and Holly head home. Kip sticks around. Kip's and Lockwood, I think, stick around.
They go to the newspapers.
Or, whatever. George and Flo get as many measurements and, I guess, sketches and stuff that they can. And eventually George also goes back to Portland Row.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's not Holly's home, but you know what I mean. They go back to Portland Row.
Well, Holly kind of treats it like home because she goes there and takes a shower.
Oh, right, yes.
And she has to use George's towel, which I feel like Lucy did not really tell her. She was just like, here's a towel, which is a good little joke. I don't know. It's like a good prank, I guess.
Yeah.
George comes back and...
With a black eye.
Yeah, he's beat up. And Lucy's like, what happened? Are you okay? And he's like, oh, yeah, we're fine. There was a gang of Rotwell agents showed up along the tunnel and started cordoning everything off. They told me to get lost. Of course, I told them to get knotted. And then there's like a good little bunch of jokes there. But this is kind of the biggest clue, I guess, we get, without being explicit about like just Rotwell agents show up out of nowhere and know about this secret passage and know how to get to this room.
And at one point they realize that nobody sent them down there.
Right.
Yeah. Or at least they don't know if somebody sent them down there.
Either these agents were in on it or they were told by Rotwell himself to like go in there. This is where the source is, secure the source, like basically clear up the evidence.
Yes.
George is like, is that my towel on your head?
Yeah, that's funny.
They find out the bones were not buried.
They were burned, which, like, obviously. Acmere's was monitored for several weeks to make sure that there was no longer a fetch and a poltergeist haunting it, which... Right. That's wild.
This is why I say that, the DPRAC would, like, confirmed that the outbreak's over.
Yeah, the containment zone was watched very closely the next night, and there was immediate, like, vast improvements. Ghosts that were aggressive and violent were sort of just there now, and a lot less of them. And it was very obvious that it was immediately better, and that it would be much easier to probably just find some sources and clean up the last ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
So Lockwood and Co. did it.
And George presents all of his information to Fitz and Rotwell and DPRAC and all of them. So
yeah, they make like copies of the map that he made about how he found the actual center and everything. A great moment for George and really Lockwood, good. Obviously.
So this puts them like at the heart of all of the greatest agencies. They're like, they solved the case that no one else could solve, and everybody knows it.
Yeah. And then right at the end of the chapter, like there's a big celebratory air, I guess, probably around the city in general for the Chelsea incident to be gone, and at Lockwood and Co. for being so publicly good.
Mm-hmm.
But then it ends with, when I sat with the others, and still more when I lay on my own in the quiet of my room, I could not escape the vision of the other Lockwood. I could not rid myself of the hollow boy.
Mm.
So Lucy does not really share in everybody's jubilancy.
Yep.
So then we get on to the final chapter, chapter 26. Lucy makes a hard choice, and George almost gets a slice of cake.
Poor George.
I'm sure he ate it like later that night in a depression.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Crying.
Like midnight, he's just like, I'm going to eat this whole fucking cake.
That's not good. That
No.
that never feels good.
And the chapter art is indeed the chocolate fudge cake. And a nice cake cutter there. Looks nice. So we open with a newspaper article about the end of the outbreak and how praise for the team has come from the highest quarters. Blah, blah. It was like a joint interview with Lockwood and Kipps, so that's fun for them, I guess. The first paragraph after the newspaper article is, after it all ended, did we return to our old ways of doing things? Were we ever quite the same? Did we go back on missions together, just Lockwood, George, and I? Simple missions, like dodging ectoplasmic tentacles in attics before heading home for tea. And there's no answer to that. Lucy just poses all these questions and then moves on.
Because this is the thing you're thinking as the reader. Like,
yeah, what
you
happens
want to be
now?
reassured that everything's okay. But it leaves you with a bad feeling. In the article, it says that there were more than 30 skeletons were discovered in the central chamber. Mm-hmm. And when you think about the bone glass was made out of 7 people.
Yeah.
So this was about like 4 times-ish bigger. But
and the bone glass was like killing people out of fear.
Right. And this thing was affecting an entire like area of London. So to me, that's not a linear progression of power. That's an exponential increase of like the bone glass would affect you if you looked at it. But this thing affected like a huge area of London with just 4 times more of the sources. So that's like a huge increase in power.
I do think like we don't know if there was a mirror involved. Like we get like George mentions that there was like marks on the ground that maybe they were dragging metal around, but that could have been iron chains keeping like them safe while they were there doing their experiments, right? So I do think it was different than the mirror.
I agree. Yeah.
Right? Like because
it's the same principle.
That they use the same ideas for specifically trying to get a different result.
Yeah, so it's really creepy and crazy, powerful. Yeah.
So we see Lockwood and Co. kind of having a celebration that they did it. They're having a big celebration all arranged by Holly, so it's all healthy food. Which earlier in the day George realized was going to happen, so he was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to the shop and get a whole bunch of junk food. And I respect him for that, including the big chocolate cake. Yeah, this is like the end of the first book, it feels like. Yeah, it does feel that way.
Yeah, big feast. To contrast it, like Lucy's feelings are very opposite of that, where she felt included and inside and like, I finally found my place, and now it's like I have no place. My presence is a danger to everyone. Yeah.
I mean, she's not thinking that at the top of her head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
but she's not connected. She's not
celebrating. She's not in a good place.
Yeah.
So, and then at one point, Holly says, you know, the phone's been ringing nonstop. Everyone wants Lockwood and Co. You're going to have to make some decisions about expanding. And then Lockwood says, actually, I'm seeing Penelope Fitz next week. She wants me to come in for an informal breakfast meeting. And it's everything Lockwood wanted for the whole book. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and he says, did you read the bit where she called us a top agency? Like, it's all of his desires fulfilled. He got it all. And I think we'll see that he does nothing with it.
Yeah, there's a cost when you do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's a price to pay.
Yeah. Kip's got a promotion, we learned, to division leader, whatever that means.
He's their top guy now, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know.
There are a couple more times here where Lucy thinks of her as Holly, only Holly. So like, I really love that just shift in the narrative. It's never like called out, but it's just, she's just always changed now to Holly. It's never Miss Monroe and all that kind of stuff.
I was just going to say, this is where we have the moment where they all realize that they don't know who sent in Rotwell.
Right.
So what were you saying?
Oh, that Holly wanted to throw away the thinking cloth.
Oh, right, yes. But George has all of his work on it about the room, the bones, the whatever Rotwell was doing down there.
But also, I don't think George would stand for it.
No, I don't think any of them would. It's
yeah.
To be fair, in this particular scene, she just wanted to take it off for their celebration.
Yeah.
And then she wanted to put on a nice clean one and then perhaps bring it back. Although I don't know that I would trust her not to wash it.
They do that in the show.
Yeah, that's true.
At the end, they put in a clean thinking cloth. But I think what I like about that, though, is that it's not like all this stuff happened and now Holly's okay and she's got the Lockwood and Co vibe. Like, she still has a place to arc to. She still is unlearning. Like, she needs to learn that it's safe to be messy and it's safe to, you know what I mean? Like, it's you don't have to be proper all the time. She has things to learn.
But I do also think earlier in the book she did want to throw it out, and now she just wants to remove it briefly. You know, so that is growth, but it's not like she's changed who she is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't want it to be too neat at the end, I guess, is what I mean too. Yeah.
And then we have a moment where Lockwood realizes that Lucy's not really with them in the celebratory mood.
Uh-huh.
And then we get into Lucy's head and about how she is still just dwelling on the ghost.
Holly's like, oh, eat this, eat that, try this. And all she can see is the fetch in her mind.
Yeah. And this is where we have the grossest betrayal. The evil, the I can't believe someone would write this. Like, I'm making it funny, but I can't. So this is Lucy talking about, so she's saying that her and Holly are, you know, they're not like best friends, but they're good. You know, they treat each other with respect now. Or a mutual policy of careful toleration. And then eventually, like she says, they still rile each other up and blah, blah, blah. And she says, her new habit of sweeping up crumbs around my plate while I was still eating. I'm sorry, but that's the rudest thing I've ever heard.
Yep.
How, like, you would have to crowd in on Lucy to do it. You would have to, it's like, it's so mean. It's so mean. It's, I will this one thing I will never forgive. It's like literally saying in front of everyone, because I assume they're all eating together when Holly does this, that Lucy is a child and that
right.
I don't have words for how terrible this is. I get that Stroud was just trying to be funny. Because if you don't take it seriously, it is kind of funny. But I would slap Holly the first time she did that. And
it's completely inappropriate.
I would never speak to her again.
It's totally inappropriate. I do take it literally, and I think this is the thing that I've always said about Holly, that this is her just being triggered. She's like, oh, no. Like, and if anything, I think that this is kind of like, I see this happen with my own kids when they were younger and stuff, that like the way that Holly copes with the world, and then she cares about Lucy now more than she used to. And so she's triggered and she's like, I'm keeping you safe. Like, you're being messy and that's unsafe, and I'm keeping you safe. And it's like
taking care of her like she's a child. Like,
yes,
I would have.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Stared her dead in the eyes and been like, I'm a fucking adult. I can do this myself. Like, what are you doing? Like, what? I don't understand how it seems like Lucy just let her do it.
I agree.
And I can't believe this happens at the end. In my memory, this happened earlier when they still like really hated each other.
It couldn't have happened because the house would have exploded in an atomic eruption of fury.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like, it's
infuriating.
I hate it so much. And I can't ever... This one thing is why it is so difficult for me to see anything from Holly's point of view. Because I'm like, no, you don't do that to people you respect.
I really do think that in her mind, it's like she's not even thinking about it. She's keeping Lucy safe because, like, you just don't act that way. And she wouldn't do that if she didn't care about her. Like, she would process it better and be like, oh, this is actually inappropriate what I'm doing. That's just how I read it.
But like Lucy says, it's a new habit. So she does it more than once.
I don't think it's just in this meal. I think it's been happening for weeks.
Yeah, no, I could never. Nope. Just a big no.
Yeah, it's crazy. But then George gets to explain what happened down in the the king's prison with his diagram on the thinking cloth.
This is also where they mentioned that there was the scratches or marks on the floor that looked like metal was being dragged across it. And we get that good joke about how George has done that to one of the wood floors in the house. That's great.
He talks about the ectoplasm burn, which was set up when we got the flashback in Jessica's room on the bed.
Yeah.
So the same kind of thing was happening here. Lockwood's like, what does the sinister red stain represent? And he's that's jam from breakfast.
So good. Love it. Which is great because it's probably from before he started drawing. So he like didn't move to a different place at the table. He was just like, whatever, work with it.
They'll understand that this is jam. It's not part of the drawing. Yeah, so they try to figure out what this whole thing was, and Lucy tells them, like, I think it was like the bone glass, and George has already come to the same conclusion. They do talk about, there's this weird line that George has that's always bothered me every time I read the book, where they're trying to figure out who maybe did this, and, you know, like, he's talked to Flo about, like, was that entrance by the Thames always there? And she's like, no, that's a new thing, so somebody made that. And they're like, well, what about the cigarette butt? And he's like, I took it to a tobacconist friend of mine. And like, what is that? Is this like a CSI specialist? What are we talking about?
I figure it's just somebody who runs like a smoke shop.
Yeah.
And George is trying to make him sound a little bit more official.
Yeah, I think it's his, like, he has a older brother who smokes. And he's like, what is this?
I imagined... Like, we have a lot of shops here that sell, like, cigars and bongs.
Yeah.
Like, expensive, fancy cigars and bongs.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me because, like, weed is legal here. Why don't they also sell whatever? It doesn't matter.
Here's just rolling paper. We know what you want. Yeah. I don't know. It's just always a weird... I know that Stroud can't... I'm surprised that even this much is in the book. Tobacco product stuff, but it's just weird. A tobacconist. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, no, it never really bothered me until this morning when I was reading it, and I was like, what does that even mean? Yeah, like just a dude you know who's real into tobacco?
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is like the people who have databases of like tire tracks and stuff that CSI people use, but like for tobacco, I don't know. But yeah, they do identify
the
like
brand.
What kind of brand and everything.
And it's like expensive, but it's everywhere.
Sure, yeah. So this is like the Chinese wax. Somebody has money.
Yeah.
Somebody was able to, you know, build a tunnel underneath
It's not
place.
just a dude.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what they're saying.
A random person.
It's somebody in the know.
Yeah, so then there's like this moment where they say it's a shame those Rotwell agents took everything apart so fast.
Yeah.
And Lockwood's like, yeah, what do you think about that, Holly? And she's like, I think this tablecloth is an eyesore. So she just won't talk about Rotwell. Like,
yeah, that
to me is like an emotional dodge. She's just like, it's too painful. I don't know anything about that. Who wants more hummus sandwiches? Like, she just changes the subject.
Gross.
I know.
I'm sorry.
It's such a weird.
Like, is it just bread and hummus? Because I don't think that's healthy.
I like hummus, but I wouldn't eat a hummus sandwich.
Yeah. There's 3 different types of hummus on bread. Oh, sorry. Anyways, this is where Lockwood again notices that Lucy's not really participating. Oh, there's a good joke where George says, only a couple more for me. I'm saving myself for the chocolate cake.
Yeah.
And then, Lockwood realizes how quiet Lucy has been and is like, what's up with you? And Lucy kind of hesitates for a minute and then says, I was just wondering, do you think any ghosts can show the future? I mean, obviously they show the past. Mostly that's what they're made of, which is an interesting way to think about it. I like that. But if fetches or other kinds of visitors can burrow into people's minds and sift their thoughts, which they seem to, could they possibly do other stuff, like make predictions about what's to come? And then I love George. You do realize the profoundest thing I've been wondering this afternoon is how many chips I can possibly stuff in. Which is funny because he did just have that whole presentation on what happened. But yeah, it's great. And then I like how Lockwood is just like, no, that's your answer, Lucy. But then George is like, well.
Yeah, every time that I've read this book, George says here, some people think they're not bound by the rules of time at all. That always makes me think of the classic book Dante's Inferno, where I know.
Book.
Well,
okay.
I don't know. It's a poem. That's true, I guess.
I don't know. I just don't think of it as being a book, but I guess that's how you read it. So yes, carry on.
Yeah. And the people in hell specifically are like, when you go to hell, according to Dante's Inferno, you automatically have all of like the information of the universe uploaded to your mind, I guess. I don't know. Like he talks to them and they're all like, here's what's going to happen in the future. And here's what happened in the past that I didn't know while I was alive, that I wish I would have known because I would have made different choices. And here's what's happening right now on Earth, because that's part of the punishment of being in hell, is like knowing all the answers and seeing how you could have done it differently. So I just think that's really interesting idea that like maybe in the afterlife, the ghosts are not stuck by time.
But the very small amount that we've learned about ghosts is that they haven't crossed over or whatever, right? That either something's keeping them here, or in the case of Skull and Type 3s, they chose to turn around and come back. So they wouldn't have access to all that. That's
Maybe.
right, because Skull can't answer those questions. And it has to be that way because obviously Stroud can't answer those questions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true about Skull doesn't have access to the future. I don't think that the Fetch has access to the future. Like the actual answer to Lucy's question is, I don't think that's right.
It had access to her mind and knew her deepest fears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do like the idea that George says here that they're fixed to a particular place, but not to a particular time. That actually like explains a lot, I think, about how we get like Roman centurions and stuff and people from World War II. And like, it's not that they're hanging out for all that time, but that because they were in that place at any time, that they can be there now because of the way that the problem operates. Like they could have even crossed over, more fully.
I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. And still appear in this time. That like, I'm actually fine with that because like they did exist back then for a while in the liminal space in between. Right. Like that all makes a lot of sense to me.
But the future doesn't exist yet.
I guess I think that you're right in the universe of the book that the future is unfolding. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
it's not deterministic.
I'm not even saying that things could see the future and then different choices can be made and the future can change. I'm saying the fixed to a place and then can appear at any time. Yes, but that time has to exist first. right? And if we're not there yet, we're not there yet.
Yeah, I don't know that if I agree with you there. It could exist up to any time that has happened, even if that time hasn't happened for them. So like, I'm fine with that. If they crossed over in the past, but they show up now, that doesn't feel like a contradiction to me, according to what George is saying.
No,
This
yeah.
really like does not matter though.
No,
like,
it doesn't.
It's just
no, but
interesting.
this is what we like.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying. I'm not saying they had to be there all throughout. I'm saying that they can't pop into a time in the future and then their self that is here now know what their future self known, because that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
Yes.
I agree
like,
with you.
The ghost could still be there when we all get there.
Yeah.
But that's just because it's part of the we.
Yeah, because yes. I agree. I don't think it's taking any information or anything like that. Yeah. It's just like, it's an experience that we have of the ghost. It's not, because the ghosts don't really have experiences. They don't have that. It's not, it's almost the opposite of what I said in Dante's Inferno, where they're like, the torture is knowing. They don't know. And they're just trapped in their little cycles, whatever.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't believe future time travel is possible. You know what I mean? Like, not even in the book, like, I mean, in existence. It's not a thing. Because it doesn't exist.
I get what you mean. I think Lockwood's right in his answer, although his certainty is, I think, incorrect. It is kind of funny, though, because, like, we say that these kids are psychic, and that is probably the most common, like, if you say to somebody, like, I'm a psychic.
That you can see the future. Yeah.
That you can see the future. It's just funny that is, like, expressly not the thing that's happening. They're talking about it, but they're saying, like, no.
Yeah, I have found in my own life through different things that I've tried that I'm like the least spiritual person ever. Like, there are things that I would love to believe in and feel more connected about, I guess, because it's kind of weird, because I was raised with like zero religion in my life, like literally zero. And most of my family believes in nothing. They believe when we die, we're just gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have no connection to anything. And which is fine. I don't really like that, but I don't believe in anything else either. You know what I mean? And anytime I've tried it, I don't believe it. It just feels like hooey to me. And I feel like looking into the future like that is kind of part of that. Although some people would argue that it's kind of scientific, but like that physics is involved. But I'm still just like, it hasn't happened. Like, it's not real yet. It's not real till it is. So I don't, as much as I enjoy, like I have some friends who are into tarot cards, and I love tarot cards. I think they can answer questions that you have and like give you different ways to think about things. I don't think they're connecting to you though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and that's kind of the same thing here that they're asking. That they're asking if, I think like I've said, the ghost is connected to her brain and told her exactly what she did not want to hear.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what is happening here. It's the larger question of like, how does time work?
Yeah.
They don't know. Like, George is being honest and being like, we don't know the answer to that. It maybe the future already exists and everything is predetermined, or maybe not. We don't know. Maybe ghosts have access to that information, maybe not. But
I do really like in these books how Stroud really toes the line really well with that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Because we do talk to ghosts in this book, but he never gives us concrete answers. Even in book 4 and 5, when
you see a lot more of that stuff.
Yeah, you see close. A lot more of that, of the afterlife portion of things. He writes it really well of not having to give solid answers about anything, which is tough to do and still feel like we got a good story in this particular instance.
It's very in its own world in a way that like I have a lot of respect for. There's a way to do that where it's like you put down other worldviews in order to make yours seem more real and rational, and he doesn't do that.
Yeah. He brings up spiritualism and religion in general very, very seldom.
Yeah.
And it really works for the story. Anyways, after talking about that for a long while, Lucy excuses herself from the celebration and goes up to her room for a bit and talks to Skull for a moment. And they don't even really talk about anything important. It's just a really nothing conversation, but still afterwards, her mind is made up. She doesn't ask him if ghosts can see the future.
That's true. She doesn't. That's true. That's
and I
really
feel like that would have been an interesting conversation. And I don't know if it's because she doesn't want to know a real answer.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Or you can argue it both ways. If she doesn't want a real answer, or if Stroud just wasn't ready for a real answer.
Yeah, and it's but I think her mind is already made up in some ways, and this is literally her having a conversation with herself.
Yeah, 100%. But it's actually just nothing, which means she didn't need to think about it. She was already there. And in fact,
he says things that she doesn't want to say. We're talking about oh, he's going to have breakfast with Penelope Fitz. That's how it starts. And before long, you're going to be a department at Fitz in all but name.
Yeah. And all the things she doesn't want. And then at the end, she says, he was a ghost. I was talking to him. He was a symbol of my problem too. And I love that she thinks it's just one thing, or at least in her forethoughts.
Uh-huh.
She does think she's leaving for just this one thing, but literally, this conversation with Skull is him also pointing out all the things she does not want to happen at Lockwood and Co.
Yeah, which are things that are definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
She can't stay here, but her reason for leaving is not that's the wrong reason to be the fact that I can talk to ghosts is a part of the problem with me. No, the problem is that Lockwood and Co. is changing to become like Fitz. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because Lockwood is having an existential freak out about having a family again and loving people. So he has to change everything. You've completely covered over the actual problem.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think her putting herself in danger the way or putting everybody else in danger, it is a problem that needs to be figured out, but is best figured out with people.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So,
which we're going to spend a whole book learning that lesson.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So she's not wrong, but she's not right.
Yeah.
But she is right because she does have to leave in order for Lockwood
That's why
to come
this
to
is
his senses.
Brilliant. This is why I love this book, because it's the right thing for the wrong reason, which is being a teenager. This is growing up. This is or a teenager. I mean, my 20s. This is So it's really good. Earlier, before she goes up there, she has this thing that kind of I don't know if bothers me as right. I'm not saying this shouldn't have been written and this is bad, but it makes me sad for her. Mm-hmm. It's where she's talking about Lockwood, and she's I understand why Jessica's room is always empty and unused and all of this stuff. And it says he had an emptiness too, a ruined space inside, a hollowness that no amount of activity could fill. He admitted this when I spoke to him, the real him, in the prison tunnels. It would keep driving him on. And that's just a view of trauma as once you've been traumatized, you can never heal. There's no changing. Things will never get better inside of you, which is hopeless and bad. That is a bad way to see the world, and to eventually, I mean, inevitably you have to see yourself that way if you're interpreting other people that way. And so that is just a dangerous thing for her to believe, and I think is part of what's feeding her decision.
To be fair, it is also what Lockwood has told her.
Yeah.
And without, I mean, I would say without therapy, but it's a book, so that's not going to happen. Without coming to his own realization about what he actually wants to be happy, or what he actually needs to be happy, or whatever, that it isn't going to change.
Yeah. He's clinging to it. Even he's constructing his whole world around her right now, changing the company, which is his house, and all of this very unhealthy. As much success as they're having, like that's even worse to do all that. And then the world is like, good job. Here's rewards. It's like, that's bad.
Yeah, here's exactly what you wanted. Or what you said you wanted.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, all of this obviously coalesces into Lucy going back downstairs and having a really good speech about where she takes on all the blame for the argument that she and Holly had. And basically she's just like, I was wrong. I'm not in control anymore. You were all right. It's going to keep happening and I can't put you all in danger. That's not what a good agent is.
The whole time she's saying that, Holly is cleaning up crumbs from right in front of her.
For fuck's sake. Anyways. And then George, people keep interrupting her to try to say, don't put all this on yourself. Like, what is that? Like, don't, it's not just
We're
all you.
Here. Yeah.
And then Lockwood is like, is that it? Is that really what this all is all about? And then she's like, it's enough. I put all your lives at risk, not once, but several times. One way or another, I'm becoming a liability to the company, and I care too much about you all to let that happen again. And that's why I've made up my mind the way I have and why I'm resigning at once. From Lockwood and Co.
Ugh.
And then, of course, Stroud ends the book with a joke because George had just been about to eat his cake. And he's like, so much for me enjoying this bloody cake. And that is the end of the book.
What a killer. Can you imagine, like, when this came out and you have to
Having to wait? God, Yes, that would have been terrible. I'm so happy I read this series when it was already completed.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a crazy good ending. It really, like, reaches back into the book and, like, makes it an incredible, part of the story, I think.
Yeah, I talked a lot about how for the first, 2/3 of this book, I did not enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not because it's bad writing, just because it's the part in any story that is not my favorite. The bit where no one's communicating, where in the first bit, you really fall in love with them as a team working together. And then in this book, they never work together. That's the point of the story. And I hate that. And all the tension between her and Holly and how they don't just talk about it. I can't stand it. And I understand that it had to happen. But as soon as they get to that department store, to the end, wonderful. I love it. It's amazing.
It's great.
But I just hate the beginning of this book. And again, that's not like a criticism. It's just not a story that I enjoy.
I like how the whole book, we said this from the beginning, is like constructed looking backwards, and it feels like it's backwards from this moment. Mm-hmm. Where in the first job, she's like, we didn't even know how great it was, how we were the best, and how that was the last time it would ever be great. And you're like, what? And like, it's all coming from this moment.
Yeah, and it also feels like Stroud sat down and was like, well, Lucy has to quit at the end, and now I have to get her there. Mm-hmm. So written backwards from two perspectives.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
This book is crazy good. And what's the funniest joke?
Oh, that last one with the cake.
The cake?
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
I do also enjoy the marks on the floor when, they're having that really serious conversation about the...
Yeah,
George... They never give it a name, the room. And then Lockwood is just like, you still haven't revarnished that. And George just doesn't acknowledge, moves on. George
gets a lot of good comedy relief moments. I like the Barnes stuff. I love when he says, like, Barnes's jaw sagged and he clutched at the revolving door for support. Part of it promptly fell off and landed on his toe. Like, that's just really good. It's like the end of Ghostbusters where the guy gets covered in marshmallow fluff.
Yeah.
It's like, it just feels really good. But can there be a different punk rock moment than quitting?
I do love the image of Lucy telling the ghosts what to do and the ghosts listening to her.
It is crazy powerful.
It's powerful, and it's like nothing we've heard of happening anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right? Like of her saying, like, just back up, and then they back up. I'm sad we don't really get to, because of the directions the story goes in, we never really come back to that type of thing with her power. Like, because those aren't type 3s, so we never really come back to her.
Yeah, they feel like a bunch of type 1s. Like maybe
Yeah.
she could herd type 1s or something.
Like she's a queen bee and it's a hive type of thing.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, I wish we got to explore that a little bit more, but the story doesn't really lend itself in that direction.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think mine is quitting, like I said.
Yeah, quitting. That doesn't feel punk rock to me. I don't know why.
I think her reason is not punk rock at all.
Right, I guess.
I think that's why. It's just like the action as a category. I'm like, if you quit your job, it's punk rock.
I really love the image of, because Lockwood still has his meeting with Penelope Fitz after this. And it's like a couple days later or next week, I think. And I just, like, she probably was going to offer him money and status and, you know, becoming a part of them. And I love this idea of him showing up and being like, what? I don't care about any of this.
None of that matters.
Why did I care? You know, what? I'm not sad we don't get to see that, because what we get in book 4 is perfect. But like, what? That would have been so great to just see Lockwood be like, why did I want this?
It's what he deserves.
It is. As I've said, he was the real villain of this book the whole time.
Poor kid. He's just doing his best. I don't know.
Until Holly at the end with the crumbs. Then her true evil nature was revealed to all of us. Anyways, if you love Holly and you want to call me out on all my Holly slander, you can do so on Twitter at Lockwood Podcast. That's us. Or you can follow me personally on Instagram at Inferior Kate Reads.
Send us emails about the Hollow Boy, predictions for the next book that you haven't read yet, obviously, because we are a spoiler-free podcast.
Yeah, we haven't spoiled it all.
Yeah.
We're good about that.
Contact at hologroundmedia.com, or you can go to the homepage at hologroundmedia.com and scroll down to the form and send it off that way.
And remember to always eat your chocolate cake before somebody ruins it.